to the video. It won't be, movie quality thing, but it will be good enough and better than you can anywhere else.
More of a reminder thing.
Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, well, and I just have it. I mean, I have a whole YouTube channel, and I keep trying to work. And of course, lately it's been focused on pastel, but I do have some watercolor ones which I shared with you. Did everyone get to look at those? What did I send? Two?
Yeah.
The two technique ones. I thought that would give you a little jump start on understanding, but we haven't gone over supplies and stuff too much yet. So
I got the supplies one and one technique one.
Yeah, that's what I got.
I got the supplies and one of the techniques. Okay, because there's 3 techniques. Okay, thank you. Because I also have a private class right now that I'm teaching, so I try to keep them similar. So I did go over some supplies. So let me start with paint. This, I recommended a small travel palette like this, and some of you, and I apologize that I wet them before I rearranged, but this is the way I rearranged it. My cool yellow, warm yellow, 2 earth tones, blues, my reds, my purples. Green, I do have a sap green, but I really don't use, you can mix green so easily. And a tube green tends to stain the paper, and then you can't lift it. And then I have burnt umber, and I do have ivory black.
There's a rollie.
Yeah, cheers a rolly. I don't use this brush. Did you guys get a brush with yours when you got these little kids? Yeah, I used it maybe twice. But this is the palette I used the last time I was, as I was saying earlier, in France for 2 months. And I just did this, and I did probably 25 paintings this size. Almost any place you go now, you can get refills for these, which is kind of the nice aspect of this. A trick is, as Emily discovered, is once you've wet them, and this is kind of a pain in the butt when we're not staying in one studio, is you need to leave them open and let them dry. The same with a big palette. And then you want to carry it horizontally. You don't want to close this up and then stick it in your bag, because then all your colors are going to run together. Emily had closed hers when they were still wet. And you can see that these flipped over and stuck to the top, which you can still use to mix. The pigment is still good. It'll dry up. It'll kind of crack sometimes, but you can just re-wet them, and they're good to use. If they start getting too dry, there is some like gum tragacanth or gum arabic. You can put like a little drop in to kind of soften them again and let that mix in with the paint. I also have my larger palette, which I use because I don't know, just have it. I like it. I put a paper towel in here. I put my most used brushes in here. I keep it flat. This one comes with a cover. It is plastic. I like it because it's light for carrying. If I am in my studio and I'm going to stay put, right now I just use this to carry brushes, but I have an old butcher's tray, which is ceramic, not ceramic. Enamel, thank you. And they do have some, I know down at Cheap Joe's, that are heavy. Must be porcelain or something that they make them out of. Is it? Yeah. And if you're staying put, that's fine. But if you're going to be traveling, you don't want to. I don't. I try to travel light.
I could not find a larger one than this
That's okay.
online. But where can I find a larger one? I don't really like such a small compartment.
You mean like?
This is really stick in your pocket and leave the house.
Right. Are you nearby here? Do you know where Cheap Joe's is?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Where I got most
They
of
have a number of these different types of large palettes. I recommend, is that where you get that one? The larger one?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Hers. And you can use them. I mean, these are good to start with, but you're going to get limited very quickly with these.
But you can't, there aren't any larger paint boxes themselves.
With the paints in them.
Yes.
Oh, with the paints in them.
Okay.
Yeah, you'd have to buy the individual paint squares that you can put into this.
There probably are, but travel palettes you do.
Where did you get that?
I think I just ordered it online,
Oh.
not knowing what I was doing. I just ordered it, and there's little things
to
Mixing
mix
things,
in
yeah.
here.
Uh-huh.
And it's lightweight, but I don't know if that's a good thing to have.
My first thought on that one is, are they color fast? So there's a lot of pigments, if they're synthetic and if they tend to be on the less expensive side, they're not necessarily color fast, which means you do a painting, you hang it on the wall, and it fades within a few years. So you can do a color fast test, and I can tell you how
let's
to
do
do that.
Are there any other?
Why do a work
I've been
of art
doing it
and
with
have
pastels.
fade?
So what I do now is I don't,
No.
unless I'm traveling, I don't buy new cakes. I will take my tube paints,
But it's too late.
Oh.
like these, and refill these. So you just kind of fill it up and let it dry.
Are there any other high quality brands that I might be able to find a different little paint, a different larger paint box?
Well, I mean, there's the common is the Winsor Newton. There's a number.
Yeah,
you
that's
can-
what
you
this
can-
is.
Yeah.
They have several
I would go
sizes.
on like Dick Blick.
Blick is a good.
Dick Blick. You can get ideas from them. Is it blick.com or is it
Dick Blick.
dickblick.com? Yeah.
What a name.
Yeah, right.
Been around a long
And there's also Jerry's Artorama. I think this is right.
That's online too? Yeah.
Is it Artorama or Autorama?
time. Or around.
I speak 3 languages, but I can't spell English words.
Is the A capital in that?
Artorama.
You should be.
I just did that so you can read it easier. I don't. It's if you're doing the URL, it just goes in. Yes.
You, I know these are just paint, but, what do you suggest as far as tube paints, if someone would buy tube paints?
Daniel, is it Smith? High quality paints, very high quality. Sennelier, but you're gonna pay for that probably. And Winsor Newton. Is it Windsor? Is there a D or is it not?
No.
Windsor. These are all good quality. And there's others too that are good, but those are probably something very good. And if you want, because you realize you start buying good paints, and I have no idea, $5, $8, $12 possible. But it's gonna last you your life for the most part, unless you're doing full sheets, which are this big. And then just buy 1 or 2 at a time as the need comes up. Any other questions on paints?
Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope that helps. So I like my larger palette. I started my first palette like this, had a lot of little trays in it, and I keep paring down my paints to the fewest colors possible to use and knowing what to mix. And as you saw on my sheet, I'm kind of going, did you guys get this one? Okay. So that's kind of basic supplies. On here, I think this is the one at the top, I have a warm and a cool of each color, and I'll talk about color theory too. So if you see these 2 yellows, they're both yellows. This is a cool color because if you look at the color wheel here, that yellow is heading toward the greens. So it's heading toward the cooler colors, right? So that's a cool yellow, the lemon yellow. And there's a number of different names and types, but I'll call it lemon yellow. And then if you see the cadmium yellow, that's heading over toward the reds. So that's a warm color. So there's a warm and a cool of each. I have my cadmium red light. I think I have 2 of these. And then an alizarin or something in the alizarin family. Quinacridone magenta is a very good one. That's a great. I have recently found out that some alizarin crimsons are not color fast, but the quinacridones usually are, especially if you get the good quality. I'm just throwing out tons of information, so I understand. So there's my warm reds and kind of a cool red. I have a warm and a cool blue. My cobalt tends to be my warm blue because it's kind of heading toward the greens. So it's kind of on the warm side. Where my ultramarine blue is heading toward the cools, the purples and stuff. So that's what the warm and cool. And we'll talk more about how you can mix those as well. Yes.
Could I have the cool of the yellow?
Lemon.
And what was the warm?
Cadmium. I'm calling them that because originally, or, for the last few centuries, it's been that. Cadmium colors, cobalt, if you hear it, obviously, those are heavy metals. So that's why they're doing a lot of synthetic paints now, because you're heavy metals. If you ever saw paintings or photographs of Rodin, Rembrandt, no. Who's the French Impressionist? It starts with R.
Monet, Mandarin.
Renoir. Yeah,
Okay.
just for a second. I guess Renoir, and there's two. You can go home now. There's two Renoirs at the Biltmore House, and there's two Monets there too. I don't know if you've seen them, but they are. Yeah, and of course, tons of John Singer Sargents. But okay, back to Renoir. At the end of his life, he was so crippled up with arthritis that they'd have to tie brushes onto his arm so he could paint. And most of that is because he used to take his brush and point it in his mouth before he painted. Yeah. So all of those heavy metals got in and affected his whole body all over and just, yeah. So we're careful with that. Don't be putting your brush in your mouth.
I just did.
Well, if it's clean, it's one thing. And what I'll do sometimes is after I wash it, and to wash a brush, like when we're painting with it, you'll dip it in, you'll have two waters, dirty water and a clean water. So I dip in the dirty water. I might wipe it on my sponge a little bit, which is also holding my brushes, and then into the clean water before I use it. But I would still not put it in my mouth because it's been in this water. As you're cleaning it here at the bottom of this, let me do it with a square one. What I'm doing at the base is I'm taking down into the bottom of the water and I'm kind of splaying the bristle. Not hard, just enough to open it up and get the paint out of there. And I can see there's a little paint in that still. And when you finish, you can do that. And every now and then, if you want, you can take a very light soap like Dawn, because we know that Dawn they use it on animals that have gotten into oil and stuff, so it's safe. Very little bit Dawn. I have a spray bottle that I mix like 10 parts water and 1 part Dawn that I use. And then you can rinse it out. And then if you want, I usually just use my fingers to shape the brush back to its shape. I mean, probably at that point you could, but see, I can't do it. Even when I know the brush is clean, it's like, I'm not gonna do it. That was one tangent. How did I get off there? So these are nice little color wheels. I don't use it so much anymore, but if you have one of these, because then you start talking about your colors, your primaries and your secondaries, which we will cover.
I have a question.
Ask away.
How do you use this brush?
Ah, that instead of the Dawn.
Okay.
I will tell you what this is. During COVID, I am renting in a place that has a beige carpet. So, and that was supposed to be temporary, but the pandemic hit and there I was. So I put a big shower curtain down, I've got rugs down, but inevitably a little bit of paint or something, pastel, especially particles, will end up on the other rug. I tried Dawn, which takes out oily stuff. I tried OxyClean, which takes out any organic material, right? But I couldn't get the pigment out because it's mineral. And I went online to an international group and I said, what do you guys use? And somebody came up with this brush cleaner. So if I get a little, if it's in a good clothes or in a rug or something, you can use this to scrub it in and then lift that color out. You want to use a rag and stuff. But this is great for washing your brushes as well. And this will take care of acrylic that's dried in and all sorts of stuff.
So you just take a wet brush and put it right in there, or
I would just, yeah. It's a soap. It's not a soap, but you can just work it in and then go to your palette or whatever, clean it out and then rinse it off. You won't have to use it that much, but.
What's it called?
This,
Brush cleaner.
oh, can you pass this around?
sure.
Do you mind?
It's called brush cleaner.
I get off on tangents. But this is what you're here, right? Knowledge and things. So, okay.
Yeah.
Because we will get painting.
Sorry, I just
Yes,
a question
of
about the
course.
brushes, the clean and the dirty water.
Yeah.
I was watching something online yesterday of someone doing a piece, and while she was painting, she always dipped it in the dirty water. Like she'd be painting something and then she'd go here and she'd go back and she'd paint. So the clean is only to clean your brushes of all the paint and start something new?
No, I use, if I'm painting along and I have blue in this brush, I don't want to go to my yellow. Remember, your light yellows are going to get contaminated the easiest. You want to be sure your brush is clean, so you wash it. She might do it differently. I wash it off in my dirty, kind of dry it to get any extra out, and then dip it into my clean. And then I'll come over here and pick up my paint. If you're painting along and she might have been working on a landscape that had some grays or natural tones in it, she might have been using the dirty just to kind of keep it neutralized. Possibly. Good question. Interesting. Okay, other questions? Colors were pretty good. I try to put mine in a usable order. If you want to, I'll leave this out and you can take a picture of it later or something if you'd like. Yes.
The paint that's in that big palette?
Yes.
Is that, you bought the cakes that size? Or?
No, these are tubes. These are all tube paints. And I do have a green over here, which I had somebody gave me some, so I put it in there. But I'm still my cool yellow, my warm yellow. This is my earth yellow. Earth tone. It's yellow ochre. Okay. Cadmium red. I've got, this is a alizarin and this is some sort of purple. I can't remember. So there's my warm red and my cool reds. I have two burnt sienna types. No, this is burnt sienna and this is burnt umber. Those are my other two earth tones. So I have yellow ochre, burnt sienna, which is kind of a brick color, and burnt umber, which is a nice deep brown, which makes great mixing. And then I've got blues. I really only need two blues. I've got the cerulean blue and my ultramarine, and then I've got, this looks like phthalo in the middle. So sometimes I'll have a third blue, but then I've got my basics. Lamp black. Reason I have lamp black is a lot of people will use Payne's gray, which is a wonderful watercolor color. What Payne's gray is lamp black and a little bit of ultramarine blue. So it gives this nice foggy look. But if you take that Payne's gray and you try to soften, say, a yellow, because of the blue that's in the Payne's gray, it's going to turn it green. And you might not want that, like in your sky or something. But if you have it, use it. Whatever you have, go ahead and use, Good. Any other?
So you're getting those colors in tubes. You're buying them in tubes.
These are my tube colors, yes. But I still have the cakes. But even now, I don't buy the cakes to refill this. I'll use the tubes to refill this. It's going to be more economical in the long run with the tubes. And I think the quality depends on which brand you get, but the quality is about the same.
So even if you don't know the names of colors, you can find tubes that match close enough.
Yes. Yes. And there's charts. A lot of the manufacturers do charts. Every manufacturer's paints are going to be slightly different. So I can say lemon yellow, and then you go buy a lemon yellow in a different brand, and it could act differently. So playing with it is the best way to find out. Or getting in a group and somebody saying, this is what this one looks like. I like the one the one what yours does better. I watch a lady online and she has, what did she use? There's a Viridian green she uses, and it's only the Winsor Newton because it's transparent. And this lady's very experienced. So I thought that was interesting. So you listen to people and you can do watercolor painting searches on YouTube and watch. And some are good and some are, so. If you look at some of my early ones, I just set up my laptop on a box like this and I was talking and I'd turn around and you can't hear. And I left them up anyway, but it's because the teaching, I think, was still there. I'm just looking around, I'm thinking while I'm talking. You guys do, but I'm thinking ahead while I'm talking about it. Just hope it comes out right. So, Next, papers. I did recommend, where's my pad? Underneath. Just something simple to start with, which is actually kind of counterproductive because students get student grade material, which is not good. And sometimes it's hard to work with. But until you know you really love the medium, I don't want you personally spending huge amounts of money until you find out you want to keep going in it. So these are okay. Watercolor, most of you got something along this line. Yeah. And you can open it up and feel. This is a very solid go-to Arches paper.
What's the first word?
Aquarelle, that's just French for watercolor. So Arche. And I'm going to pass this around, kind of make sure your hands are kind of clean, but because the oil from our hands can actually affect the watercolor paper. But I want you to see the difference in some of these. This is the Arche, which is a good one. This is kind of nice because it comes in this little pad that's already taped down in a sense. So it's not going to wrinkle. When we get into these pads, I often tape it down on, I have these acrylic sheets that when I buy frames that comes with the acrylic, stuff. And I save that because I put glass in my paintings. But I'll tape it down because water on the paper is going to absorb, especially good paper that's got rag in it, cotton, instead of tree fiber. That water absorbs and it's going to wrinkle your paper because it has to be absorbed into it. And then it dries, it'll keep that wrinkle unless you tape it down to hold it. So it dries flat again, it like stretches it. So anything that's kind of solid, not too heavy. I mean, I like those because they're light. The only trick with these is now when I go out and paint on location, this reflects too much. But inside, they work great. So this is the Arche. I also have, which this one I'm not going to hand around. I was with a friend in France, southwestern France, and she would do these surprise things for me. And we drove into this tiny town, and there was a big water wheel mill right there. It wasn't big, it was small, quaint little town. She said, oh, let's go in here. We went in. It was a paper mill. I walked in and they had sheets of examples all over the walls and I'm just like drooling. So this was what I bought for €16. Totally handmade, beautiful. I guess I can hand that around, just be careful. These are, this is again, I believe this is Arche. This one doesn't have a watermark on it. I've got a couple different in here. This is a good paper. Sometimes with the full sheets of paper, these come in full sheets like this, and then I have a video that shows you how to bend them and carefully rip them instead of cutting them so you get a nice, this is the natural deckled edge, which makes you know that it's handmade, and this one is ripped. You can tell that as I go along. This is a smooth paper, so it's hot press, and if you feel it, there's two different sides. One's a little smoother than the other side. And then I have this, which I'm pretty sure is Arche. This is 300 pound. This is one sheet of paper. And you can see the difference between the two. This one's much more firm. I love traveling with a 300 pound, and most of what you have is usually 140 pound paper. That means 100 full sheets of that paper. If you have 100 of them, it'll weigh 140 pounds. If you have 100 of these, it'll weigh 300 pounds. So that is just, this is great for traveling because you don't have to tape it down. It's thick enough to hold its shape. So I'm going to hand these around so you can get, just as you're looking ahead, I mean, go ahead and use up the paper you have. I have this, and I use this a lot for samples and things, for demos. So that's this one that I kind of, whatever, I gave a couple examples. I'm not that fussy, get what you can for what you can. If somebody offers to give you art supplies, always say yes.
Which one is the 300 pound?
Can you figure it out?
So which one? This, that's 300 points. Oh, okay.
Questions moving on? How are we doing? Now my clock's being used, so I don't know how. Allergies and talking, that's why I have cough drops. Brushes. My two go-to brushes are these. It's just a nice round brush and a flat wash brush, about an inch big. You can see I do have a larger one, and I have a couple of different of these because I keep trying different ones. But I found this one that I recommended to you a couple classes ago, actually. Somebody came in with these silver black velvet. If you go in a store to buy a brush, hopefully they will have a little tub of clean water there. You take your brush, get it wet. Now, at first when you buy it, there'll be sizing on it to help it hold its shape. Sizing is like starch. So you want to gently work that off. And then off to the side, you want to tap it. And you want to see if it comes to a nice point. See if I have one that won't do that. This one won't. This I use for other things. I use this one for textures and stuff. Well, no, this one comes to a pretty good point, but I have some brushes that just will not point back up and they won't hold their shape. So you want something that'll hold the shape well.
And what size is that silver?
This one is a 10, but I'd say 8 or 10 are a good. I mean, this is so versatile. You can do things from tiny, tiny little lines to a lot of shapes, some calligraphy style painting, which we're going to work with when we get into the flowers. The flat brush, the same thing, to check it, tap it, and you want to see if on the side view it comes to a nice chiseled edge.
Why, when it's wet?
When it's wet. So get it good and wet, kind of work it back and forth, sway it, and tap it. And see how that's got that.
It looks a little wavy.
It does look a little wavy. It's interesting to me. But most of these look pretty good. Now try this, because this looks more like an acrylic brush rather than a watercolor, which is,
I just had a bunch of.
I mean, as you get going along, it's nice. That would work.
You could use an acrylic for watercolor?
You can use anything. If you look at some of my brushes, I bring this in, these are my little extra things. I have resist in here. I'll talk about that in a minute. I have some water-soluble ink pens. I'll use these for birds and things like that. But they're also water-soluble, so you write it down. And I use this for my sketch journal, which I'll bring in next time. And a water brush, and it can create washes as well, which is nice. Something like this is good for textures. So anything that will make marks, see I have a couple of those. I have a different brush that I use, here it is, it has blue tape on it, and it points up pretty well. But this is the one I use when I'm using a resist. So just ahead, you don't have to do this. A resist you can paint onto your paint and it will keep it white while you're painting around it. We'll talk about that in a couple weeks or so, okay?
So it blocks it.
Huh?
It blocks the other.
It blocks it, so it dries almost like a rubber cement, but it's better than that. So you paint it on, but I use that brush is dedicated to that, and I put soap in it first, wash off the majority of the soap because this will stick in your brushes. But if you wash it out right, it'll work.
Probably doesn't smell like rubber cement either.
What else do I have? I didn't talk about paint. I don't use white. A lot of your sets came with white. That's a Chinese or a kind of a gouache white. And it's going to end up being chalky on your painting, which is fine. But if you want to really, if you've gotten to a point where you really need to bring sparkle back, I just use a titanium white acrylic paint. I don't use it much at all, but that's one of my last minute. Gotta save this painting. These are fun too. These are India ink. I'm sorry, I'm just showing you while I get them out. India ink paint brushes. We had a Japanese exchange student once, and it's a brush, but it has a cartridge of ink up in here, so you can just kind of keep painting. That's fun sometimes too. On extra little tools, I saw somebody with one of these. These are kind of nice.
What's that for? What is that?
This is a little template for shapes. Like if you have a piece and you need to lift some of the painting out, we'll talk about what lifting means, but you need to lighten a shape, you can use this and you can kind of gently dampen that paint right there, and then you can press it with a paper towel and lift it out. And this is one of my favorite little tools. You see I have one every place, because this makes, you can just put it on paint and make nice little lines. And I'll show you that. Was that in one of the examples? Yeah, if I've said this and you guys have it, let me know. Here's a cool brush. These are little angled brushes. I don't know if you can see them, but see how they're tipped at an angle? That's nice for some things. I'll use it sometimes for windows and little tiny windows. Somebody in one of my last classes had a wedge type brush that she could make. Is that you?
It wasn't me, but she loaned it to me.
Yes. These, and I do not own one of these. Can we pass this around? It's great for leaves and stuff and petals on flowers. Yeah. She was just like, boop, boop, boop. So painting tools, drawing tools, I do have an X-Acto in mind, and you don't need these, but you can scrape texture. You can do all sorts of things. So the question is that what type of brush? Yes, I would say 2 of these will do almost everything for you, and then you can pick up whatever else around the house. I do like on my flat brush this handle, the wedge handle, because, I mean, the round ones are nice. These are good for making dots. Yeah, you can use the other end of the brush, making dots. This, you can also scrape paint. So it's a nice little tool to work with.
Where did you get that?
I've had it so long, I can't even.
I did, right? What kind is it? I don't know. The letters are all worn off.
It's a 3/4 inch watercolor wash brush.
I got this one because it has the wedge on the end at Cheap Joe's.
And what's the brand?
Princeton.
Princeton. It's a good brush. Princeton make very good brushes.
Nice.
I have, where's my good one? Here. I don't think this is, it's a Winsor Newton actually. This one I bought it like 30 years ago was a $40 brush, so I can't imagine what it would cost now. So I take care of it, but I use it for large washes. It's beautiful brush. Again, if you're going to buy a brush, go in and test it first, because you will find that if you wet the brush and then tap it, if it doesn't come back together, it's not going to be one that's going to be controllable. And some of them just tip over. It's really sad. It's like, what do you do? Well, you know, you tap them and they end up like this, tipped. And it's like, okay, not that one. Somebody gave me this one. I haven't played with this one much, but it actually, you can see it's not as sharp a tip as the other one. All right.
So what would be a good mid-range brand for brushes? Because I'm not sure these are that great. One's a Cheap Joe's.
Just should be okay.
And that one.
This one looks pretty good, actually. Where's your
Yes.
water?
I forgot my water.
Okay. There's
There's what?
There, tubs, up there on your tray.
So I'm just gonna test. Okay. I'll do both of them at once. These are good. They're working for you.
Okay, great.
I mean, until you feel you really need something else, don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Any
that's
questions
fine.
about what you? Judy's like, what's going on? Is it splaying? Yeah. It was just drying out a little bit. Okay. It's still pretty good. Now I'll Could you tell the difference in some of these? Compared to yours, which is probably tree fiber, and these are cotton fiber. And it will make such a difference. And one of my private students that I have this afternoon, what was the source? She went on one site and she bought sample papers and got about 10 different samples, small pieces like this that she could try to figure out, because that's why there's so many, because all of us have different intents and different things we want to work with, and we like working with one better than the other, or it's so versatile.
So the advantage with the 300 pound is that it doesn't wrinkle when it's wet.
When it's wet, it doesn't wrinkle as much, right? But it is.
Costs a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Exactly. That was my next statement. It costs quite a bit.
When we get better.
When you get better. So kind of, I would recommend slowly build up, and the more you do it, but quality paints, which you don't need a lot. Again, my list is, 10 colors? But build them up slowly. You're gonna I find my ultramarine blue goes first, in both my sets. So that's the color I have extra of. And wait until you run out before you buy the next. No sense of going out now and buying it until you use up what you have. Same with groceries. I don't know. Right? We go out and we anticipate that we're going to need this in a couple of months. We'll just buy it when it's out. I'm getting very frugal.
COVID, no.
Not during COVID. No. The toilet paper thing. I was like, what was it with toilet paper? I did not get that. Okay, paints, paper, brushes we've gone over. Some of the others, we've talked about palettes. We've talked about extra tools. Here's a thing I will talk about as going through. When I set up, I open up my equipment. I get my palette out first. I dampen it either with a little, it's nice to get one of these that had the little squishy near the hole on it. You know what works great? The old honey bottles have those. They have a little diaphragm kind of thing in there that blocks it and stuff. Of course, you don't have to clean it out totally, because original watercolor actually used glycerin. It's pigment, which is a powdered dirt or semi-precious stones. That's what they started with. Then they'd mix it with honey and glycerin or something along those lines. So it has the next to the least amount of binder in it of all the mediums. So pastel has very little binder, just enough to hold those particles together, because all pigment starts with the same particles. It's called ground pigment, if you get it. Pastel just has a tiny bit of gum tragacanth or something to hold it together. Watercolor has some glycerin and honey or something else like that. Oil, they add the oils in. Acrylic has a plastic medium. Which is why I don't use acrylic. I tried it. It just felt plastic to me, I like natural things. Going back now, looping back, right? So I started pigment. So you get your palette out, dampen it so it's ready, because if they've dried out, it's going to take 5 or 10 minutes for them to be ready for you to use. And then I set up my station. So my paper will go right in front of me. I am right-handed, so my palette is off to my right. If I have coffee or something, it's behind me, or it's off to my other side. There's nothing worse than having you drink besides this and dipping it in. It's like, oops. So you can put that. My water, my 2 waters, my dirty, I've gotten in habits, and habits help you move faster, but it takes time. So my dirty water to the right, my clean water to the left of that. I have a sponge, and the sponge is basically for 2 things: to set my brush on and to remove some of the water. Watercolor is a very precise balance between the amount of pigment and the amount of water. And that's what's going to make things lighter or darker, or how they flow. And it takes time to learn the difference. There, as you're putting it down, it's very wet and very shiny. I have actually written down terms for this. Where's my terms to try to make it clear? Not there. Yes. So you have your gloss, like it's really, really wet. And then as it starts to dry, it turns into a sheen. And the sheen is still kind of shiny there, but you can kind of start seeing the texture of the paper underneath. And then you have matte, where that shininess has gone away, but the paper is still slightly damp. So that's matte, M-A-T-T-E. And then you've got dry paper. And kind of those 4 steps, deciding what you need to do and what you want to do at different times, is what's going to help you with watercolor. Yeah, I had another point, just went in my head. Patience, that's what I wanted to say. With watercolor, you have to wait. If you've done a big wash and covered things up beautifully, you're going to have to wait for that to dry if you want to do detail work. It has to be totally dry. I often have a sheet, I used to get boards this big, and I'd have 4 different papers taped down on like 2 boards. And I'd get a wash going on this one, and I said, well, I have to wait on that. So then I could go and work on another painting. So, you can work on multiple at once. Then you have to remember where you were when you go back to the other one. But, so that patience aspect is important in watercolor. And somebody was saying that people are afraid of watercolor.
Me.
Yeah, right. I knew it. To me, it's the medium that is most like a partnership. The other mediums you can pretty much control. Watercolor wants to work with you, and it partly wants to do its own thing while you're trying to get it to do something as well. It's like a cat. Watercolor is a cat.
That's great.
Perfect. I love it. Watercolor is a cat. Perfect. So sometimes if you're doing a big wash, just let it go and wait to see what it wants to do and then what you want to do with it after. And as you practice over time, the expectations become more focused because you start learning what your paper is going to do, what your type of paint is going to do, because each paint on each type of paper is going to be slightly different. I mean, there's generalities, but, and your brush. This is the hard day when I talk nonstop. The first day is always. So my palette here, paper, my 2 waters, my sponge for helping me to control the amount of water, any extra tools. My spray bottles are usually nearby my water. I have 2 spray bottles. This one, this small one, creates a very fine mist, if I want a light mist. This one is rougher. It creates dribbly mists. So sometimes different effects for different things, because you saw some of the techniques, but you could put a wash down, wait for it to get to about its matte stage, and then just kind of like check it out over here. Is it working? And then go across that, and it will resist some of the pigment, and you'll end up with these like almost snowflakes or something. If you want really good snowflakes, you use salt. These are techniques I will work on later too. I have this wonderful little baggie of sea salt. And I actually, here's some too, right here. I don't know where I got this wonderful vial. I must have bought saffron or something at some point. And when your painting the sheen is just going and it's turning into its matte, you can sprinkle on some salt, step back and let it totally dry. And that salt will suck in the water and leave the pigment behind, and it makes these little star shapes. It's fun. I have some giant salt here too, I don't know why. But it might work for something someday. Palette brushes, pretty much all ready to go. If I have an image, it's off to my left. Anyone here left-handed? Okay, so it's off to my other side.
Okay.
I learned that early on. I think in my drawing classes, I've told people, because I was teaching them how to draw their hands with the basic forms. And this guy, and I went around, and his paint, it was just not working for him. Because I had said, draw with your right hand, you're looking at this. He was left-handed, so he'd look at his hand, and then he'd try to draw it, and he'd look at his hand. It's like, oh, yeah, this was early on in my teaching. So, yeah, your image off to this, whether you're plein air or you're working from a photo or something, is usually here, and then you can look back and forth that way. Extra tools. Paper towels work great for blotting things, for textures, also for drying off brushes if you have to. I have a variety. You can see I collect types of paper towel. These are those cheap napkins. Have to be careful. The ones on the roll here have a strong texture. So I think Viva doesn't have any texture on it. But, maybe you want the texture, or maybe you can control it enough so you're not going to get the texture. I also have some natural sponges, which makes a nice stamp sometimes. But start simple and build up. There's all sorts of ideas there. Good. I've covered that. Any questions so far? I'm going to just look at my notes. Speak up if you have. No questions. Oh, paint and brush care. Okay. Brush care. A brush is made with, it used to be natural hair, like squirrel hair or something like that. A lot of times now it's synthetic. But the hairs are actually quite a bit longer than when you're seeing it outside the brush. You can't see on this one very long. You need to use this. So the hairs are actually probably about this long, So what they do is they bring the hairs together, they wrap them with a string, they stick them in this metal part, which is called a ferrule, add some glue to help hold it in there, and then with these, this one it's crimped with a wire, this one is crimped on the metal to make it flat. But if you see people leaving their brushes in the water like that, it's not good. Two things. It's going to dissolve that glue and your brush will start losing hair, like I am. I'm hoping because it's spring. And it's also going to bend the hairs. These are hairs. They're going to curl. If they're in there, you're going to get a nice little curl on that, and you don't want that. We want nice straight. So do not leave your brush in the water. Rinse it off well, kind of wipe off the extra water, and then set it down on your sponge. Helps it absorb. Brush care. And then try to put them in a place where they're not going to get mushed. Like a plastic bag is not going to work. I don't put my brushes in here. That's a lot of the reason I have these lying on a tray. I don't know why I have so many. I do. Just collected them over the years. But make sure that they're not going to get bent. There are different types of brush carriers that you can get. There's a bamboo one that you can stick the brushes in. Anyone have any sort of brush carrier with them?
Plastic bag.
Something like this, like, yeah. And then she can roll it up, and it's gonna protect the brush as long as you don't bend this part of it. Something like that. Little things to think about. It's pretty. Yeah. Did you make it?
Yeah.
I like it. Very nice, Mary.
No, I didn't.
Paint care. We talked a little bit about it. If you're using something like this, let it dry flat. You're not going to walk out, pick this up and tip it on its side. Try to let it dry flat. That's why I have a big cardboard box, because I just put it in there, and then I have to carry the box home like this. If it's dry, I can tip it a little bit, but if it's wet, I have to move it around that way. I should get a cool box instead of an Amazon box, but it happens to fit my palette, so that's the reason I have that one. So let it dry. When you're painting, if you go, as I was talking earlier, your yellows will tend to get contaminated the fastest, as we learned with with Emily over here. She now has, and I tried to lift some of it out, but she now has green in her yellow. And that's very common. That happens a lot. With a damp brush, you can try to, can you guys see? I'm sorry. I hope it's okay I grabbed your,
No, please.
you can kind of lay, it's just damp, it's not very wet. Can't do it with a dry one. The dry's not going to absorb like a dry sponge doesn't pick things up. You need it to be damp. And just kind of roll that in there and lift that up and then rinse it off. And that should hopefully pick up some of that green, and you can work on it until it's pretty clean. Kind of just pick it up. And again, the reason this happened is because she closed the cover when they were still wet. A wonderful example. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Some people have watercolor pencils. I have some. I don't use them much. I might sell. Did I see you have watercolor?
No, these are just pencils.
Oh, they're just pencil.
Sometimes I draw with.
Yeah, I mean they're fun. You draw with them like a pencil, and then you take a water, just a brush with water in it, and it will kind of bleed, and that's a nice thing to have too. All right, I'm gonna check that I have. In this class, we'll move along as people are ready to. We're aiming toward kind of springy things, flowers and stuff like that. If you have photographs you want to use, I mean, I have these I got offline. They're just little brushwork paintings that we can practice from, and it's good to, and this will help us learn how to control our brush and what kind of brush strokes we can make. I picked these out so I can do some, oh look, birds.
Never gonna move that.
These, I'll tell you, these birds are basically this brush all the way. This is all you need for these paintings. The point.
What, is it have a number or a?
Yes, this is a 10, but 8 or 10 is a good size.
Okay.
And I should know what that means. Is that millimeters? Does anyone know? I don't know. Or photos. If you start collecting photos like this, and I'll print some of I'm sorry, I'm not gonna print up for everybody, but I will email you PDFs of this that you can print up if you want. Try to make them simple and isolated to start with. I mean, I was at the Arboretum the other day, and the masses of these azaleas were just, but it's hard to paint mass. We need to learn to paint one at a time before we learn to start massing them. And just keep practicing. In Asia, the apprentice calligraphers and the people that do like the special brush stroke that you see them, they'll practice for like 10 years before they, so don't give up if you don't get it the first few times you do it. That's another good reason for the cheaper paper, because you can sit there and just practice this one stroke over and over until you get it, and you start learning the balance between the water and the paint and the pigment, and what happens if I do this, what if I twist it. Yeah, we're back to beginning stuff, right? Practice, practice. Did I send this out?
Yes.
Okay, so you have this. This is talking about the colors. What do I have here? I have the cools. Is that cool and warm? Cool. No. Yeah. Yeah, it kind of is. More or less. Cool and warm. But you see after it, it will say T or O. T means transparent, and O means opaque. And one way, let's just practice a little of that right now, because I'm getting tired of talking so much. Transparent and opaque. I need a water resistant something. So I'm going to take my graphite pencil and I'm going to make a line. Can you kind of see over here or no? Mm-hmm. All right. So the transparent colors, like your lemon yellow, will, okay, this is what I do. I pick up water, I come to my paint, and in these you're going to work it. I could put this over here. You're gonna work it a little bit if it's dry, and then check it here. You're not gonna go right from the paint to your paper, usually. You want to bring it onto a mixing area because that way you can tell that it's consistently spread throughout the brush, and you're checking the water and pigment balance as you're doing this. I often have a practice sheet off to the side to check it before you go on to your painting. Because you don't want to get the wrong amount or something here and then go into a painting that you've been working hours on and you've just ruined it. Always have a scrap off to the side. So if I take that lemon yellow and I'm bracing myself, that steadies my hand because, you know, coffee hand in the morning. I could have that espresso to wake me up and then I get here. So, and I'm just going to draw that across that pencil mark. That's a transparent. If I choose an opaque like yellow ochre and I work it in, you can actually, as you're working this paint, you can see the granules because this is just dirt. I make my own pastels from dirt. I've collected it, you know, and there's a way of doing it, and it's kind of fun, but it takes time. It's like, I'd rather be painting. Why am I still doing this? And you draw a line across that same line. And I do this before I set it down. I clean my brush, and eventually you switch the water. Eventually my dirty water gets so dirty I have to go get clean, and then I'll take my clean, push it over. I kind of rotate them. So this is not a perfect example, but you can see a little bit how the lemon yellow, you see that line right through it, but the yellow ochre is more opaque, and it kind of obliterates the line a little bit more because it has heavier particles in it. Am I going too fast? So you can play around with it on your paper. This is a lemon yellow. See how transparent? And
That's
this
transparent.
is okay. I mean, it's not a great example, but it does tend to block out that a little bit more. By understanding which ones are transparent and which ones are opaque, it will help so many ways. You can mix anything with anything. But a good rule of thumb when you're starting out is mixing transparents with transparents and opaques with opaques. So, let's just go around. Transparent, opaque, opaque, transparent, opaque. Any of your earth tones are opaque. Transparent, transparent, opaque. You can almost look at them. They look like they have more something in them. And that's just the characteristic of the pigment itself. It's just going to be different.
So you're saying don't mix the two?
Try not to mix the two. I mean, you can. It gives a different effect. What I would start out with is mixing your colors, playing with it, seeing what works together, because you learn so much that way. I'm going to email you one of these. I happen to print them up on cardstock. It's just paper. And these I've listed. These are some of my colors. Like here's lemon yellow, cadmium red, ultramarine blue, cobalt this way, and then of course across this way. So I've taken my palette, listed across and listed down. And then what I can do is mix my lemon yellow with lemon yellow. Well, we know what that's going to do, right? And at first start maybe doing it half-half, about one part this and one part the other. And then practice across, always cleaning your brush in between. And then coming this way. Then you could do a second chart, one part this to three parts that, because it's going to change. So that's, if you really want to learn more and more about your paints, this is a great thing to practice. We can do some of it here. You print it out. Yeah. Did I send you this?
Yeah.
And I sent you the blank one. Whoop.
Oh, I don't
A
have
blank one.
No, I made this one. But the blank one's good because then you write in your own colors that you're working with.
But it just prints out on regular paper.
Regular paper, again, cardstock, because with the water, you can just put it on regular paper too. But you're just learning about your colors and your pigments and how they work together. had a former student, and this is what she did.
Wow.
And this is just one of her sheets. She just got really, and then she started studying the pigments and the different brands of pigments. And I'm like, all right, now you know more about this than I do. But she learned so much doing it. And now she has I mean, you don't have to do it to this extreme. But it's just a great way of learning what the colors will do. I mean, look at the variety of colors in there as well.
Those are pretty.
And how many colors she has? She has some extra colors in here. 2, 4, yeah. But even with just the 10 basic colors, and I think that 10 includes 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 includes the black. And black I just use if I want something really dark. I don't use it that much. Yes.
When you say mix 1 to 3 part, can you explain that? Like if you start with one color,
Yep.
and then you take.
So if we
I
were
don't know
mixing
what that means.
lemon yellow,
Uh-huh.
okay, and I pull it out into the middle of my palette, push it there, but kind of gently pushing the brush like that, you're going to release the pigment onto the palette. Now I'm going to rinse this because I don't want to contaminate my other colors. My kids were little, they tried to get into my palette. I'm like, no. It's one thing. Yeah. And so I bought them their own palettes. You want to mess up your yellow, go ahead. But yeah, I like to have my colors very, very clean. And you can see when you look at mine, some of them are older. They're kind of chunked up and stuff. So there's 1 part lemon yellow. And then I'm going to pick up, I don't know, where should we pick up? Let's get some ultramarine blue. So that's 2 transparent colors. Ultramarine blue has a little bit of, and I'm going to put it over here on the palette. So I haven't mixed them yet. And I'm making the consistency even here. You know, I'm just working it in on the palette. Okay. Now I can bring them together. And see, I can mix them here. So that's about 1 to 1.
Okay.
Right. And if I said, oh, if that's 2 green, I'm going to pick up another yellow, you know, so that's probably 2 to 1, 2 parts yellow to 1 part of the green. And you put it on your thing. Let's try it again. Maybe 3 parts.
So it's 3 dips back into the color.
One color than the other.
Okay.
Yeah. And if I went the other way, it would affect that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And by cleaning your brush in between each time, you're going to make sure your colors are pretty pure. Do you want to, you spend a little time playing. Do you want to play with some now? Try it out? Yeah.
One more question.
Yes.
When you initially start with 2 colors and you put them in their little palettes, you let them, they dry in between, but when you're first using them, do you let them dry before you use them? If you, I'm not making sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, these come dry.
These come dry, but when you use your 2 paints and you're gonna fill something up
Right.
like this.
Okay.
Oh, you're not gonna fill something.
Yes, you can.
like-
You can use this too. You could put, if this, you use this up, you can use this tube paint to replace that. Or even on top of it, as it gets down halfway, go ahead and put some tube paint on
But
there.
then you just let it dry.
You let it dry so you can transport it.
Okay, but it doesn't have to be dry to use, of course.
No, you
No,
want it
you want
somewhat
it.
wet. So you
Okay.
want it,
But not when you're saving it for future use, you want it dry.
you want it dry. That's why you
Okay.
leave it open. It's
Okay.
like you'll all walk home like this, you know, until it gets out. See, these are dried out already. They were all
Okay.
wet. And different pigments dry at
So
different
these are
rates.
2. Some of these are
Some of these are tube.
Okay.
This is from a tube, but this was a
Yeah.
cake.
Okay, yeah.
Does that make sense? So then when I open it up the next time to paint, I'm going to dampen those while I'm setting everything else out, and that gives it like 5 minutes to soften that paint to get ready to use.
So you do dampen it.
Yes.
Okay.
So like right now, that's why I have something like this. I mean, you can use a little spray bottle as well. But you just want to
Because if you get a little,
So that they'll be ready to use when you want to sit.
Yes, I think I remember using too much.
She did use, okay, I was
Is that
using,
burnt umber?
Already.
And it's burnt umber, see how that's dark brown?
Bubble up on this thing.
Do you have any more paper powder
that
cups?
made the ugliest color I've ever seen.
Well, there were some up there. Remember we brought some in? I don't see them.
Okay, well, how many did people need? Just like one or two?
There were two. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, a lot of information.
That when you go home and it starts all over again.
Yeah, I do sometimes, but just.
Interesting, right?
I thought, those are incredibly close, those two.
Yeah. This, if you add a little more pigment into it, like you'll see how much.
Yeah.
Just add a little more water to it, change.
That one is more
Still have a color.
Yeah.
brick color, like rust.
Yeah, but it is interesting to, you have to play with it to see how
You
much.
have to play, and the little palettes, work it in your palette and play around with it and feel the difference. I mean, it's not super big, you can see that this is more opaque, it has more particles.
Okay, that's opaque and that's transparent, which means you can see through it.
Right, the transparent ones look very clean on the paper, and this one, to me, I mean, it has the feeling that it's more gritty or earthy. It's not gritty, it's,
I know what
I
you
can
can.
think of, I'm trying to come up with another
Well, let
term
me,
for opaque, yes.
I do not have a printer at home,
Okay,
so how can
I can print up a couple extra, yeah.
I'd be glad to pay for the printing,
No,
I
no,
just,
no, okay.
that would be less expensive than buying a printer at home, right? I'd just save our money.
For new art supplies.
Right.
Yes, yep.
Picturing.
I would
And I
appreciate
have
that.
one. I know, I got so mad at people passing like years, because I'm on this pay by you buy the ink, and they kept sending me ink and sending me ink, and I'm like, I have too much ink, cancel my, they can't cancel it. They do have to go through this whole thing. And then if you cancel it, the printer doesn't work. I have-
no, it's really a
I have 3 or 4 packets of ink, but I'm not paying for the ink, I am paying for the paper usage.
I didn't wear them.
But it's my paper.
Very similar.
That's just
Oh,
weird.
wow.
So they're like, actually, you're paying for the service, not for the ink. So you,
Just
That's
like
how they make
a
their
Hewlett
business,
Packard
yeah.
tax.
it's interesting, so you end up with all this extra ink that you don't, I don't use at all.
Yeah.
We
Oh,
don't,
mine just has that.
but we haven't gotten, we've had it for
I
several
love
months,
it.
we don't.
I got one.
You buy the ink at the store?
No, we got this service where you send it, but I don't think they've sent us any ink, of course, we haven't run out of it. So, how much water goes on the, I mean, how damp is the brush need to
Well,
be?
I usually just, is this clean cut already? Or-
Yeah.
So I wanna get most of that off, because I want it to be as clean as possible. Do this.
So did she
Dampen
tell us
here,
how do we
and then
know which
you
is
just try with it, and then so it's damp,
Mhm.
and then pick stuff up.
The
But it
first one is
depends on how-
transparent, the next one's opaque,
Bring that up.
transparent, opaque, transparent.
How do you make watercolor lighter? What if you want a lighter color? More water. So more water, I mean, you could even start and do an exercise with that. Have it very wet and just a little paint. Add more paint. Add more paint. So you can start seeing that the more paint you use, the darker and more intense your color is going to become. You've done this with a lot of your underglazes, right?
Yeah, here's a suggestion, because I didn't know what colors they are, they don't say.
Oh. See, Andy did this. So she took her little palette and it made squares that goes with her palette. So when it dries out, it looks a little different than when it does when it's wet. And then she can remember exactly what this is. A Prussian blue? What is this one?
I don't know what the names are.
Oh, that is cool. You came across this before with something, didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, and I make.
This is Viridian green, this is a sap green, this is yellow ochre, this is burnt umber.